Hey, it's Summer from Pretty Bird Kitchen, and today I just wanted to pop in and record a quick video for you showing you how I make water kefir. So I've got my handy notes here so I don't forget any important steps. So let's get started. So water kefir is a probiotic drink that is very similar to kombucha. It's sweet and fizzy, and it really tastes like a soda, only healthier. And unlike kombucha, it does not have any caffeine because it's not made with tea. It's made with fruit juice or sliced fruit. That's where it gets its sweet flavor. I really like water kefir. I've been making it for probably maybe about a month now, and my husband and I really like it. It's really quick to make, so if you were to try to make your own kombucha, that would take quite a bit of time to let it ferment, but water kefir, you have a probiotic-rich drink in 3 days flat, sometimes less, depending on how the weather is. If it's warmer, it'll ferment faster. It's also cheaper than buying kombucha. We were spending, I don't know, $15 a week buying enough kombucha from the store for me and my husband to get, our daily probiotics that way. So this way is way cheaper. You only had the initial investment of the water kefir grains, and then you don't ever have to buy those again. Your only ongoing cost is sugar to feed the grains, and then either fruit juice or sliced fruit to flavor it. It's also eco-friendly. We were going through so many bottles of kombucha, and that was just a lot of glass bottles that we were accumulating. So I like that you can reuse the same bottles over and over when you make your own water kefir. So yeah, it's eco-friendly, it's cheaper, and it does taste great. So we've really enjoyed having water kefir, so I thought you would enjoy making it yourself too. So let's get started. There's a couple different steps when making water kefir. You have a first ferment and a second ferment. So let's start by preparing our first ferment. So let's see. You need water kefir grains. That's these little guys right here. And I bought mine from Amazon. I bought water kefir grains that were already hydrated and active and ready to go. You could also buy dried kefir grains, probably from like a health food store, or you could also order those online as well. The only thing is those are not active yet, so you need to follow the instructions on the package to activate your kefir grains, or just buy them already activated like I did. Once they're active and you start making your first batch, after your first batch they're ready to go, and you don't ever have to reactivate them. They're just ready to go for the next batch. So you need your water kefir grains, you need sugar, and when I tell you how much is going to go in here, you're going to think, wow, that's a lot of sugar. But it's really not. The water kefir grains are going to eat most of the sugar, and it won't be in the final product. So the sugar that I like to use is a special blend. I learned how to make water kefir from a post on feastingathome.com, and she included a recipe for a sugar concoction that is very high in minerals. So water kefir grains, they thrive in a mineral-rich environment, so you want to use a mineral-rich sugar. So here I have a mixture of cane sugar, coconut sugar, and pink Himalayan salt. The ratio here is 4 cups of cane sugar to 1 cup of coconut sugar and 1 tablespoon of Himalayan salt, all mixed together. So I just keep mine stored in this big container, and it just makes it easier. That way I don't have to, measure it out every single time. So we're going to need 1/4 cup of sugar for 1 quart of water kefir. You can also use straight cane sugar. You could probably also use white sugar. I wanted to use something a little less refined than that. I did try using straight coconut sugar, and I'll admit I didn't really like the flavor of my final kefir. Coconut sugar has almost a burnt flavor. It's like a really rich, maybe like a caramely flavor. And that's fine, but when I used straight coconut sugar, it just really made my kefir taste a little burnt-like, and I just didn't like that. So I really prefer this blend right here where it's cane sugar, coconut sugar, and the Himalayan salt. So like I said, we're going to need 1/4 cup of this sugar mixture. And we're also going to use 1/8 of a lemon. So I have some pre-cut lemon slices that I keep in my refrigerator for this purpose. I just cut my lemon into halves, then cut that into halves, and then cut those pieces into halves again to get little 8 slices. And then, make some room here, we're going to need some water as well. So, like I mentioned, water kefir, they like, those grains like a high mineral environment. So if you have hard water, it's actually a time when it comes in handy. So we have hard water here, and I just use it straight from the tap. I don't filter it because I want my kefir grains to have as many of those minerals as possible. The only catch is chlorine will kill your kefir grains. So what I do is I fill up this container with water, and I let it sit uncovered for about 24 hours, and what that does is it lets the chlorine kind of evaporate off, so then you're left with non-chlorinated tap water. So we've got our water here. If you didn't want to use tap water, you could use filtered water. If you use the sugar blend here, you might be able to offset that lack of minerals. Since this is a mineral-rich sugar blend, it might be all right. You could also use bottled spring water. I've heard other people have success with that. So those are our ingredients. As far as supplies go, we're going to have this half-gallon mason jar. I like these. Really, we're only going to make a quart of water kefir, so technically you could use a quart size mason jar, but I don't like filling things up all the way to the rim. Things slosh around and they make a mess, and I just prefer using a bigger jar. That way I have plenty of room to work. So I prefer half-gallon jars. Just buy a pack of, I think they come in a pack of 6 when I bought them at Walmart. So get you a pack of half-gallon jars, and they will serve you well here. So we're going to need that. We've got our measuring cup and a wooden spoon to stir everything with. After we get everything put in here, we're making a lot of noise here. Once we get our water kefir in here, we're going to cover this jar. And I just took a thin dish towel. This was not a terry towel. This is probably like a flour sack towel or a tea towel. I just cut one into 4ths, and we're just going to lay it over the jar and secure it with a rubber band. So you don't need anything fancy to cover your jar. Just a nice light weave fabric should be fine. That way the water kefir can breathe. Got buzz on me. Alright, so those are the things you're going to need. And when you're gathering your supplies, make sure that you're using non-metallic supplies. Since water kefir grains are acidic, it can react with metal, and you just don't want that. So be sure to use, I have like plastic utensils here, glass, wood. Those are all materials that are going to be safe for your water kefir. So we've got everything gathered up, so let's mix up our water kefir for the first ferment. Alright, so to this jar, I'm just going to add a little bit of water to start out with. I'm going to take my measuring cup. We're going to add a 1/4 cup of this sugar mixture to the water. Then we're going to stir it. This is just going to help dissolve some of the sugar grains. I've heard mixed reviews. Some people say you need to dissolve the sugar all the way before you dump in your water kefir grains. Other people say it doesn't matter. So I just stir it a little bit. Try to get most of that sugar dissolved if you can, and then we'll fill up the jar about halfway with water. So let's see. I'm going to fill it up to the 4-cup line. Maybe a little more, it's alright if you go over a little bit. Alright, so we've got 4 cups of water in here and 1/4 cup of sugar. Now I'm going to drop in 1 of my lemon slices and 1/4 cup of kefir grains. I'm going to take our spoon and just give that a little stir. Alright, then we're going to take our cloth cover the lid or the rim area and then secure it with a rubber band. Alright, before we move on, I want to tell you a little bit about this. So, consult my handy notes here. Alright, so I told you about the sugar. It does seem like a lot, but like I said, the grains will eat most of this, and you can be sure of that because when this is done with its first fermentation, you can taste it and it won't be sweet at all. It'll be kind of tangy. So that's how you know that you're not going to be consuming all this sugar. So the lemon, I will say that that is optional, but I found that my grains do like it. I don't know, I'm not really sure why, but sometimes my grains can get like a funky sulfur smell after they've been fermenting for a while. It's almost like they've gotten too much minerals, or too many minerals, correct my English here, too many minerals, and they just get like overloaded or something like that. So the lemon kind of helps cut down on that. You can try it with and without. Personally, I like the flavor, and my grains seem happier when I use that little slice of lemon, but it's totally optional. Let's see. Alright, so now that we've prepared this, we're going to let this sit for 2 days. Now, that's just a general rule of thumb. You probably will want to taste your water. You know, taste it right after you mix it up so you know how sweet it tastes right after you mix it. And then maybe taste it after a day. If it's still sweet, it's not ready. It still needs to ferment. After about 2 days, my water kefir is usually ready to go. It's not sweet. It's got kind of a tangy taste. And when I smell it, it smells kind of like yeasty, like bread. And that's when I know that my water kefir is done with its first ferment. Also, you can kind of like jiggle the jar a little bit, and if you see bubbles rising, that's its first little bit of carbonation in there, and that's also a sign that it's well on its way, almost ready for the second ferment. So anyway, we're going to let this sit for 2 days. In warmer weather, it would only take 1 day. That's why I mentioned just taste it. Whenever it's no longer sweet, then it's ready. We keep our house at about 70 to 74 degrees pretty much year round, and yeah, that's probably, with that temperature, that's probably going to take 2 days to ferment. If it's warmer where you live, it could take less time. Alright, so once that's done, it'll be ready for the second ferment. Now, I already had a jar that I made 2 days ago. It's been sitting for about 48 hours, and it's ready for its second ferment. So we're just going to take off our little cloth cover. You probably can't see that, but there are some bubbles in there. So what I'm going to do is fish out this lemon slice. That in my bowl right there. Alright, so now we're ready to assemble our kefir for the next step. So we've got our water kefir here. We need to gather the rest of our ingredients and some other supplies for this step. So we've got our finished water kefir. We're going to need some fruit juice. So this second ferment is where your kefir gets its flavor and its carbonation. So I like flavoring my water kefir with apple juice. It's a good flavor and it's easy. Just buy a bottle of juice. You could also use sliced fruit. I just did a test with some grapes, and it turned out really good. So fresh grapes, I just kind of muddled them up before I put them in the jar with my kefir. So anyway, you can use sliced fruit or juice, just something to give the kefir a nice flavor. So we've got that, and then we're going to need another half-gallon jar just to make mixing easier. We're going to need a measuring cup. And we've still got our wooden spoon. We're going to use our strainer. Now all I had was a metal strainer, but I did have this nylon nut milk bag. And since I didn't want to use metal with my kefir, I've just been using kind of this makeshift strainer. But I do have a nylon mesh strainer on the way. I ordered it off of Amazon a few days ago, so hopefully it'll be here and kind of make my life a little bit easier. So use what you got, but if you start making water kefir a lot, you'll probably want to invest in a real strainer. So got that. We'll need a small funnel, and we'll need some swing top jars. Now you can do your second ferment in mason jars, and that works fine. It does. I've done it, and it does work just fine. Personally, I like swing top jars just because you know you're getting a complete seal. I mean, that's what these were made for. They were made for bottling fermented beverages. So it's, in my mind, it's more of a safety issue, because as these build up, as your water kefir builds up gas, it can explode your jar. And I don't know, I just feel like maybe this would have less of a chance of exploding than maybe like a mason jar that wasn't necessarily designed for bottling purposes. So anyway, we've got our swing top jars. I just ordered these off of Amazon, and I'll include a link for them. That way you can see which ones I got. Alright, so what we're going to do, I already took out my lemon slice. I'm going to put my strainer over this second jar, and we're going to dump our water kefir into this jar. Give that a little swirl so they don't stick to the bottom. Alright, I'm going to put my grains back in this bowl. You can't really tell it, but these water kefir grains, they didn't quite double in size, but they did grow. So your kefir grains will grow exponentially with each batch you made. So eventually you'll be overrun with kefir grains, and you can either give them away to friends, or you can dump your extra kefir grains into like smoothies or things like that, just to try to consume them without just throwing them away, because we don't want to be wasteful. Because those little guys, they have good yeast and good bacteria in them, and you know, we want to eat those and get our good probiotics, rather than just throwing them down the drain or in the trash. So we've got our water kefir here. It's about 4 cups of water kefir, and now we're going to add in our fruit juice to give it some flavor. I'm going to use 3/4 cups of apple juice. Juice you can get away with maybe like 3/4 of a cup, but if you use fresh fruits, you might want to use closer to 1 cup. I'm going to pour that in there, give it a stir, and then we're ready to start bottling. Okay, so I've got my swing top bottles here. Just going to pop a funnel on top of one. We're going to fill them up. Now we're only going to go to the bottom of the neck right here. I used to fill them up to where there was only like maybe an inch of headspace, and my bottles, they kept overflowing every time I would try to burp them to let off some of the pressure. So anyway, I figured out you're only supposed to fill them up to here. That way they have plenty of room for expansion. So we've got these bottled up. We're going to let these sit for about 24 hours out on the counter. They're going to be building up pressure, so you'll want to burp them every 8 hours to kind of let off some of that pressure. That way your jars don't explode. So to burp your jars or your bottles, you're just going to pop the top, let some of that gas come out, and then you're just going to recap it. And that's it. So just do that about every 8 hours, and you'll notice that it gets really fizzy. Once they're done, you're going to refrigerate them, and then you can drink them. So as it just so happens, I have some that just finished their second fermentation, so I'll pop one and you can kind of hear the explosion. Did you hear that? See, it's real fizzy. I don't know if you can see it, but it's very carbonated and delicious. Alright, so those are ready to be refrigerated. Alright, so that's how you'll do your second fermentation. And when you make your water kefir with juice, you can just drink straight out of the bottle. But if you used sliced fruit, you'll probably want to strain off that fruit before you drink your water kefir. It's probably fine to consume, but I just don't really like eating fruit that's been hanging out for a while. So yeah, just strain that off before you drink it. So let's see, I had a couple other notes, maybe some questions that you might would have. So let's see. For the bottles, like I said, you can use these swing top bottles. You could also use a mason jar. Sometimes those don't seal off quite as well, so you might not get as much carbonation out of them. But when you're just starting out, just use what you've got. You could also use some old kombucha bottles. Those are really strong. You just want something with a strong, thick glass. That way, as the pressure builds up, you don't have as much of a risk of your jar exploding. So yeah, you could use old kombucha bottles. I've seen other people do that, and they seem to work just fine. So for flavors, we really like the apple juice flavor. That's been probably our go-to, but like I said, I did do a test with some sliced grapes. I just kind of, well, not sliced, I chopped them up and kind of like muddled them a little bit before I put them in my mason jar. And the flavor turned out good. I probably, just for simplicity purposes, I probably would use a grape juice next time, just because I like not having to strain off little bits of fruit. But if you wanted to, like if you didn't want to use juice, maybe your dietary requirements don't let you have juice, you'd rather use whole fruit, then that's fine too. You could use strawberries, you could use blueberries. Just be sure to muddle those as well, kind of break up the skins a little bit. You could probably do pineapple. I actually have some pineapple in the fridge, and I'm thinking about making that to see how I like a pineapple flavored kefir. That'd probably be pretty good. Let's see, I already told you that your grains should multiply with each batch. If you find that you have too many grains, you can store them. If you can't, use them up by giving them away or putting them in smoothies, you can store them in the fridge. So what you'll want to do is take a quart mason jar and fill it with some sugar water. I would probably fill it halfway with water and put maybe a tablespoon of sugar in there, swirl it around, and then store your extra grains in there. Now, you'll want to store those in the refrigerator and swap out that water with fresh sugar water about once a week. And if you're like me and you have very high mineral content water, you might notice that your grains get like a funky sulfur smell. That just means that your grains need to rest for a little bit. So what I do is I strain off my grains, rinse them really good, and then put them back in a jar with just plain water, no sugar. And let them hang out for a couple of days in the fridge, and that takes care of the smell just fine. Oh, so how much kefir you'll want to drink each day. So if you're new to water kefir or probiotics in general, you might want to start out with like maybe half a cup of water kefir every day and just see how your body reacts to that. Some people, when they haven't had a lot of probiotics and then they start to introduce that into their system, they get like some negative digestive effects. Even though probiotics are really good for digestion, if you're not used to them, they can cause a little bit of discomfort. But my husband and I, we always have a lot of probiotics going in. So we drink a lot of water kefir every day. We drink probably 2 of these each every day, sometimes more. Really, I don't think there's a limit on how much you can have every day. Just do what works best for your body. Listen to what your body's telling you. If it doesn't seem to be agreeing with you, then you might need to cut back a little bit until you get used to it. So, I showed you how to make 1 batch, but since we go through a lot of water kefir, I actually make 2 batches every single day. So I've got a constant cycle of water kefir in, it's first ferment, second ferment, plenty of bottles in the fridge. You can probably see some on my counter back there. Those are fermenting. I think they've got another day before they're ready to go in the fridge. It's just sort of a constant cycle thing. But if you need to pause your water kefir making, like if you're going to go out of town, just use those steps I mentioned to rest your kefir grains. Just pop them in the fridge in some sugar water and they'll be fine for a couple weeks. In fact, I think you can store your kefir grains in the fridge for months as long as you just keep switching out that sugar water. The only thing is just keep in mind that your water kefir grains are happier when they're actually making kefir. So, you don't want to pause your water kefir making for too long because your grains could theoretically die. They're really hardy. It's really hard to kill your water kefir grains. But yeah, you'll just want to keep an eye on them and make sure they're still looking healthy. Did want to just say, These little guys are so weird. They're kind of rubbery, bouncy like, and if you drop some on your counter, good luck picking them back up because they're slippery little suckers. So anyway, that's the joy of water kefir grains. Anyway, if you have any questions, just leave a comment below and I'll do my best to answer them. I will catch you next time.